Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast, Journey to Well. Today, I am joined with Lynn Mull. She and I have such an interesting intro story, so I wanted to share how I met Lynn, although we haven't even met in person, which is kind of funny. But I was living down in South Jersey for a while, and there's this really cute coffee shop in Stone Harbor. And it was the first time I went to this coffee shop and I ordered my coffee and I was looking at all of the tables and there was oracle decks or just some sort of deck on every single table. And I sat down at one and I picked up the oracle deck and it's called the 24 oracle deck. And I start leafing through it and it's like I'm reading the intro. There it is. Yes. And like there's moons on the front and you know that I'm like all about moon and astrology. So I already was so connected to it. And there's all these cards and I'm reading the intro and there's like she's explaining how it's Reiki infused and I just became obsessed. So I Googled Lynn and I found her on Instagram and we ended up connecting and I found out that she lived in Pennsylvania and I was in New Jersey and all of these things. So such a funny way to meet you, but a very divine way, I think. So I'm super excited to finally sit down with you and have a long conversation about you, about Reiki, energy work, wellness. So, like every podcast intro, I'm going to let you introduce who Lynn is, what you want to share with the world. And then we're going to get started talking about all things wellness and a little bit more of a practical side of wellness, which I'm really excited to share. So, who is Lynn? Thank you so much for coming
Who
on the
is Lynn?
podcast.
I know for those who picked up the video or watching on YouTube, I was just sharing some of a picture of the deck, and I will link in the show notes. I'm going backwards. The 24 Oracle deck. I'll link a
Please.
little discount for your listeners if they want to use it. So we'll do that after. But I am Lynn Mull. I am living where I grew up after stints in both San Francisco, Marin County, and then New York City. I worked in finance and technically retired. It's a long story, but the short version is I technically retired after 25 years in finance on Wall Street. And I did everything from traveling every week as a consultant, internal consultant, to post-merger integration, to what I call the big girl job. I had the corner office. It wasn't a corner because the building was round, but I was in the matching, suits every day in the late 90s, early 2000s, lived through a lot of ups and downs, but ultimately started my wellness journey after my mom was sick. Now, my mom is still alive, but I am really focused on practical wellness and helping people in midlife, whatever midlife means. It could mean you've had a milestone, marriage, a divorce, a big relocation, whatever that sort of post 25
Mm-hmm.
moments in your life that it helps you reevaluate. And I love helping people consider, what does midlife, mid-career, what does it look like?
Mm.
But I really started my wellness journey when my mom was sick, and I knew that she had imbibed stress and had no somatic release of her stress of childhood, of caregiving, never taking care of herself. And I then had really small children, and I woke up one day and I was like, I can't do this. I am going to recreate the story of my mom with colon cancer. She was sick for 8 years, multiple surgeries. I mean, not even multiple. It was just
Mm.
over 10 surgeries and chemo and the caregiving and all of that. And I started my journey. You talked about the Reiki infused deck. I started it with coaching courses. A lot of people in wellness love to learn. I'm one of those people, reading, learning. Although I can talk a little bit later about why I don't think everyone needs to be certified in everything. That's another one of my aha moments. But
Please.
I went through coaching, and it really opened my eyes to a different way of communicating and living and operating. And then in COVID, I was on a bike ride. We were living with my in-laws in the South because I needed help with work, um, my work schedule, my husband's work schedule in school. And I was reading this book, and the book said, if any part of what you're listening to, I was, listen on an Audible, and if any part of this resonates, keep checking this out. Take one step, go home and Google. And it was Kelsey Patel's book. Kelsey Patel wrote Burning Bright, and she then became my Reiki master.
Ah.
I had no idea what I was signing up for, really. And Reiki is just energy healing. And what I love about it, and I'm sure we'll get into it, is that a lot of, whether it's religions, although Reiki is not religious, but let's just say religions, historical societies like the Romans and the Greeks, and different groups that come together culturally all have similar principles. But what I love about Reiki is it's so simple.
Mm.
And we'll get into it, but I think you can do energy work on anything and there's science behind it. So I really bring the wellness and the woo together, and hopefully you and I will get to meet one day in person. But this is why I love social media and I love the interweb. It's not all bad, people. It's not all bad.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I've met so many people through Instagram specifically, and so many great conversations. But I totally agree. We have similar approaches, I think, um, because my background is in speech pathology. I went to school. I have my master's degree in speech language pathology, which is a science field. And so a lot of my coaching, even my breath work, you can hear like in my breath work intros, I'm always like, let's talk about the science behind this. Let's talk about what's actually going on. What are we innovating when we are working on nervous system regulation and all of that? So I'm super interested to talk to you. Let's start actually with Reiki, because that is something. So I'm Reiki certified as well. I grew up with it. My mom has always been very spiritual. She was a Reiki master before I was even born, I believe. She was
So
a
cool.
yoga teacher growing up. Like I grew up kind of in that woo-woo world. So it's not woo-woo to me. It's like this is just
Life.
this is just life. Like this is just we are all energy. And that's what I've kind of grown up believing, but I totally understand that I am the minority probably in the world, and most people are like, what is Reiki? So let's start there for the listeners that don't even know what that is. And then I would love to hear, you mentioned there's science behind Reiki. So I would love to hear your kind of diving into that if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an I'll also send this to you for the show notes, but there's
Sure.
an article in the Atlantic that talks about Reiki, and it said, what is it and does it work? And ultimately the answer was, who cares? If it does it all, it's great. If even if it's, even if
Yes.
it's just a placebo effect,
Yes.
it does work. So Reiki is universal life force energy.
Mm.
And when you look, and this is, controversial for sure for some, and when I say it's not religious, I do mean that. I believe it's this connection to all things.
Yeah.
The yoga mat that you and I practice on, or the chair I'm currently sitting on, are made up of atoms, and they're vibrating at a certain frequency.
Hmm.
And so as you get Reiki trained, like you and I, or we get attuned, we get these um, openings, so to speak, to be able to interpret those frequencies. And if you've ever had a moment, this is what I love to say, like you're tapping into this. If you've ever had a moment, I know especially when I was moving around so much in my 20s,
Mm.
and ultimately when we were looking to buy a house, I would walk into a house and I'd be like, can't do it. Weird
Yes.
vibes. Can't do it. There's something weird going on in this basement, or I don't like the way the windows trap things. Like that is in sense reading. They say read the room. You're reading the energy of the room. Oh, and it's just a way to read the frequency. So the science behind it is, and this is the controversial part, is people think that Einstein in my community was ultimately starting to tap into Reiki as he looked at how atoms were formed, how things changed. And so
Mm.
Reiki, how you and I, or when I practice it on myself, my kids, my clients, it's like, okay, I notice you have something caught in your throat. And I don't mean saliva, and I don't mean a piece of the bagel you ate. I mean, there's something blocking how you're speaking to others. You're saying not saying what you think. Or if I notice someone in the back of their neck has a real tight back portion along your spine, I'll say, are you speaking really negatively to yourself? So it's a way to really break down parts of the body in order to say, you know what, this feels off. And then Reiki, you can move the energy through. And a lot of people are doing this in many different ways now, whether they're doing cold plunges, which I also don't love, but I get it. Um, people are doing Ayurveda.
Yeah.
They're doing, my sister-in-law only drinks warm water, also
Yeah.
trying to cleanse. So you can come at these energy cleanses in many different ways. Dancing, they say, is a great way. It's all the movement and shifting. So you ultimately feel better and more clear to make a
Mhm.
decision, clear to create a boundary, clear to take a boundary away, clear to be nicer to yourself, clear to be nicer to other people. And the idea that just focusing on one day at a time, I
Mhm.
went all the way around and sort of slammed science in the middle, but it's just the creation of atoms and how they move at a frequency. And you can look up any physics book.
Mhm.
There's truth in that.
Mm, yeah. And I love that you're bringing up the point that there's so many different tools because that I think um I try to remind my clients and my community, my tribe that I have certain tools that I have found really work for me. Human design, love that tool. Breath work, love that tool. Reiki and somatics, love those
I
tools.
love it.
Those are my tools. But thank you for reminding us that it's simply just a tool. Drinking warm water moves energy. Walking, like even when you were talking, I'm like, I gain so much clarity when I am in motion, and I'm sure that you can connect that to human design. We're both manifesting generators,
Yeah.
so just kind of that we do well with motion. I'm gonna leave it there. I can like go on so many different tangents,
I know.
but
And I have a mentor in yoga and entrepreneur. She doesn't claim to be an entrepreneur, but she is at
mm,
heart, right? So sort of following her, she's one of my muses.
mm,
And her practice is all about embodiment and
yeah,
slowing down and having
yeah,
a slow, less technology life. And where
yeah,
I love that and have learned and have gained, and I certainly use it in parts of my life because we all have to pause. We all have to. I also operate better when I am working out in movement. And I said that to her in our last sort of cohort together. I said, Mary Beth, I just can't say that I am quote unquote on or in my best self when I
mm,
am so freaking slow because then I really get stuck. So, and
yeah.
she said we have a mutual friend. She's like, she wants to run a marathon every time she goes out for a run. Like that's like her pace. And so knowing what your pace is, knowing what your tools are, and maybe if I had picked up Reiki when I was in my teens, maybe I wouldn't have liked it.
Yeah.
But also, don't stop exploring. I was introduced to a different type of breath work a couple of years ago and completely changed my ability to let go. And again, I'd done breath work before for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but having things work at the right time or working with a practitioner at the right time, just allow yourself, I think, to explore. I know I do. I'm sure you have
Mm,
not only your tribe, but your community of people who support you in whatever capacity. And I sometimes, I'm adding to that list of people I go to.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And yes, I'd be so curious to see your mentor's human design chart because I think that that's one of the differences. And this is a broad, I mean, we would have to look
Right.
at your whole chart, but this is a broad statement. But manifesting generators, like slowing down does not need to mean all the time stopping your body, finding what works for you. So for me, slowing down is going for a walk and getting away from my phone. Like I if I get really busy, I'll go for a walk because I need exercise and I'm still on my phone. And like that is not slowing down
Right.
my soul or my mind at all. But going for a walk or doing yoga, like there's that movement, or going for a swim or something. And then maybe for projectors and reflectors, it's actually physically slowing down the body. A lot of projectors, they do really well, like reclining, so laying down. My
Yeah,
mom
she's a
is a
projector.
projector.
Yeah, she's a
Yeah.
projector.
Yeah, and like my mom like takes naps, meditates. Like I mean, I meditate too, but it's different. And find what works for you. And like you said, continue exploring what works, even with breath work, right? Like there's so many different forms of breath work that sometimes we just have to find what modality, what
Right.
manipulation of breath works for us. And I think that this, I would assume, ties into, in your intro, you shared using practical integration of wellness. So I would love to chat about that. What does those three words mean to
Yeah.
you, practical integration of wellness?
Like, absolutely. We teach what we need to learn is a lot
Mhm,
of what we talk about.
mhm,
And I've always, in my corporate life, I was always on planes. And so I read a lot, whether it was
mhm,
fiction, nonfiction, biographies. But then I would just keep reading and reading and reading. And I'm like, did I learn anything? Did I integrate
mm,
that? This is just one example. But I would love to go on an eat, pray, love journey. And I would love to go to an ashram for months on end. But guess what? I can't. I don't know if I ever will be able to.
yeah.
I don't know a lot of at least Americans who can take more than a week off at a time and really take like a solid break. And
Mm,
so the idea of some of these, I would call them extreme
mm,
practices of shutting down or taking sabbaticals. We all have bills, we have responsibilities, whether it's caregiving, being around family. You said your house sitting, dog sitting this week, right? Like you can't just pop up and leave. Or in
yeah.
my case, I couldn't just say, I love when people are like, just clear your day off. Well, that doesn't work in a lot of ways. So, for
Mm,
example, how do you integrate these practices that you've either been hearing about or people that work with you and I in different capacities? How does it work? So one thing I'll
mm,
say in Reiki, one of my favorite tools is a body scan. How many times do we take a minute to just scan our bodies from our toes to our nose?
mm,
And I'm a night owl, so I like to do that at night. And I have a friend, she's like, I'm a morning lark. I'm like,
yeah.
Christine, do it in the morning, girl. Like,
Yep.
do it in the morning. But just take a body scan. You can do that anywhere. You can do that in the shower. You don't have to have a mat out. You don't have to have this meditation cushion out.
Mm,
So I think it's the practical ways that work for you. If you and I love to go on walks, maybe it's taking a journal prompt that, I tell my clients, take this journal prompt and take a walk in a walking meditation with this idea of
mm,
why are you letting your friends and your coworkers step on your values? So that's the idea of finding ways to make it work for you. And especially for those working, well, anyone really working, is how
mm,
do you take a break? So I don't know about you, but when I'm in my zone of genius or when I'm really hyped, a couple of Mondays ago, I have a big leadership wellness presentation for managers in a couple of weeks. And I worked all day and I got up and I was like, this is not good. I
mm,
barely got up. I barely ate. The only thing I did was hydrate. So
mm.
I had to really reset and regroup. So I couldn't clear, that was a Monday. I couldn't clear Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to finish the presentation. But what I did do is I set clear action. I've got an hour to review my edits in the morning.
Mm,
I'm going to do my yoga class. Then I'm going to come back and have a brunch, a self-made brunch, and then I'm going to go back. And then you have these sort of, and then I had a doctor's appointment. So I had these walls to work in or fences,
yeah.
just finding ways to reset. And then I mean, I'm talking about it. I didn't beat myself up because I had a really a grind out day. You're going to have days where you have to hustle, or periods or
Yeah.
weeks or seasons. If anyone's an accountant out there, like, they're in, they're in big pain leading up to tax day. Like, you
Yep.
can still have sort of a family, partners, responsibilities, and work in some stress release, some anxiety release.
Yeah.
And my last favorite idea is wash your hands for longer than you would want. And I don't mean the COVID ABCs,
Oh.
whatever that song was, but so if you're watching the video, I'm really pretending I'm washing my hands. I'm slowly even washing my wrists and my forearms. And there's a couple of things, is that water is healing, water is a release, water is a cleanser. And you might say, Lynn, that's so obvious. But there's another component, that when you're washing your hands, you're either alone in a bathroom, so the door is shut. You can do that
Right.
anywhere. You can do that, in certain stalls in public restrooms, if you are in at a restaurant and your friend just upset you, or your mother-in-law gets you, or whatever the deal is. And then you can also, like, my back is always to the room when I'm doing dishes.
Mm,
Or we had a ton of family in town this weekend. And you know what? I washed my hands so much, and I was just massaging. And I was saying to myself the whole time, release the comments, release the comments of negativity that have
mm,
been passed around in the past hour, right?
mm,
Maybe it took 2 minutes. Do you think anyone noticed? I probably, if I asked them, they'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I thought you
mm.
were cleaning the pot.
Right.
Or, and my back is, so I'm not engaging in anyone. I'm not looking at someone in the eye. Um, and then just a card pull. Just pull a card if you're struggling on Sunday scaries, or that you've had a really rough period where a big milestone happened and you're living in grief and you can't get up. Pull a card to sort of jostle your brain. That's what you're trying to
Mm,
do. You're just trying to move your atoms, move your energy, move your core in a different direction, just like you do with somatics. It's just,
yeah.
and take those moments without it having to be, moving to India for 3 months.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I love all of those very practical tools. I love the hand washing. I talk about water a lot too.
Yeah.
Um, Definitely I think one of like my almost aha moments was that we often think that we need to have like these big self-care days, or we have to have these big like go to an ashram, or like you have to go to an hour-long yoga class. And so sometimes we tend to be very black and white, almost like, well, if I can't do it for an hour, then I'm not going to do it at all because it's not going to be beneficial. Same with working out. I think I've been kind of exploring that, like weightlifting. Like I used to go to the gym for an hour and I would work out for an hour, and I don't I've been kind of exploring like, okay, so maybe I don't necessarily want to go and work out for an hour, but let me just go and move because I need to move my body. Let me go for
Right.
30 minutes or 45 minutes and then just see how I am. And especially like I love the like 2-minute tools
Yeah.
that you gave us too, because it doesn't have to be this big long thing. Same with meditation. I think a lot of times we struggle with meditation because we think we have to do this 20 or 30 long 20 or 30 minute long meditation where like we've just been going at 100, and we can't actually slow down and pause and slow our mind for that long. So we're like, well, I can't do it. 5 minutes, even if it's just
Five
like a
minutes.
5 minute breathing exercise.
Right.
See how that feels in your body, see how that feels in your
Right.
mind, and then move on and keep going about your day. I like that you wrote out. Well, I don't know if you actually wrote it out, but you kind of like made a plan for your
Yeah.
sessions and then putting in small things. I was actually talking about that last podcast. I had someone on a cycles guide, and we were talking about periods and just cycle alignment. And that was one of the things that we talked about was like when you're on your period or maybe in your luteal phase and you feel like you don't have that much energy, we can't always just stop. Like life doesn't stop. Your
Right.
kids don't stop needing you. Your work doesn't stop needing you, but creating those small moments and then going on with your day, it truly does make a difference. It really
I
does.
think it does too. I love, and Reiki has taught me in the way that I don't know, was gifted it, I'll call it, is I do a ton of visualizations. I think because
Mm-hmm.
am I see a lot of colors when I am participating in Reiki, and I also am clairaudient, so I get a lot of messages, and that's another thing I do for my clients. Like I'll get a ping, and I'll be like, you know what, I'm going to record this quick visualization. I can tell so and so is really hesitating on something, and whatever
Mm,
comes through, and those are never more than 5 minutes. And I don't, I'm not driving everywhere, but when I get in these, some days you're just in the car a ton, and I'm like, I
mm,
don't want to be in the car anymore. I want to be moving or walking. And then I'll just at a stoplight, instead of grabbing my phone or checking, changing the station, I turn everything off and I'm like,
yeah.
what do I need? Take those 5 breaths, exhale. I've been known to scream in my car, like,
Yes.
and my daughter is, I have a very intuitive younger daughter who also is hyper aware. Her EQ is way high, and
Yeah.
she screams into her pillow. And my husband at first was like, what's going on? I'm like, I wish I had learned this. This is the best somatic release for her. She is exhausted. She's frustrated.
Yeah.
This is awesome rather than stuffing it down. So there's that quick, yeah, it's also like as adults, letting yourself daydream,
Mm,
letting yourself sort of zone out. And obviously I talk, I don't want you to crash a car or do something crazy, but in these moments of pause that life provides you, like between sets at the gym or
mhm,
waiting for your coffee or whatever it is, bringing yourself to waiting for the water to warm up in the shower.
mhm.
What am I noticing?
Mm,
Like, shit, my heart's racing. Or, oh God, I haven't taken a really deep breath since
mhm,
like I've since I woke up. I'm shallow breathing. What do I need? Oh, okay. I really I'm thinking a lot about this upcoming conversation I'm having with so and so. Maybe
mm,
I'm going to journal about it, because we do push through a lot, as you said,
mhm,
and we have to,
mhm,
but there are other ways of living. I always say there's another way,
mhm,
and it's not perfect. I yell at my
mhm.
kids. My husband would say I yell at him, but and I get it's not perfect. It's
Yeah.
totally not perfect.
But being curious, right? Like just being
Right.
curious, can there be another way?
Right.
Can I have a different perspective on this? Can I approach this situation differently? You reminded me, you know Wayne Dyer, I assume.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there's this podcast or book, I think it was in one of his books that I was reading, but he was talking about finding those small moments because
Mhm.
actually there are so many small moments of pause that we have. And you just named a couple: waiting for the shower to warm up, waiting that like 5 minutes in line to pick your kid up from school, walking to go get the mail, right? Like it's a
Mm.
3-second walk, but that's still a pause. So what he was sharing was he's like, at red lights. He's like, I meditate at red lights all the time. And he was like, trust me, the person behind you will let you know when the light turns green. So he
That's right.
closed his eyes. But even just waiting at red lights, and you don't have to close your eyes, obviously. You can keep your eyes open and wait for the green light, but taking that 30 seconds, whatever it is, and taking that pause. There's so many pauses that even if you feel like I'm listening to this and like I just literally don't have 5 minutes in my day. Okay, so look at your whole day and what's going on in that day and find the pauses. Doing the dishes is a great pause. Like
Yes.
you can use that time, or loading the dishwasher. You can use that time for whatever, bringing awareness. I love that you're just like, do a body scan, check in with what you are feeling in your body, because we really don't take a lot of time to do that. But my question there is, what is the benefit of that?
Mm.
Why do a body scan? Why do I need to pay attention to what's going on in my body?
And we were talking about, some people like to sit, some people like to stand, some people like to lay down, recline. It doesn't matter in what shape you're doing your body scan. But
Mm,
for those who know, and I'm sure a lot of your tribe knows the chakra systems, you are getting really big clues through the root chakra. So you're
mm,
scanning maybe from about your hips, your knees, your joints, your feet, and you're also getting information on the left side. That's the feminine side of your
mm,
body, the heart forward side, the side that might be craving rest, that might be craving creativity. You might be getting
mm,
on the right side, you might be getting clues. If it's tight, you're overdoing it. You're being too much in your masculine in that sun, heat, pump it up, get going,
mhm,
and again, it's okay. You want that balance of the masculine and the feminine. If you're working on a big project, you're about to push send on that podcast release, like you're going to have that oomph of the masculine
mhm,
getting that to-do list done. But you're getting information on what to do and what to focus on. So a lot of my clients come to me and they're either overwhelmed or they can't, they call it brain fog. And they're like, I don't know what to do next. I'm struggling to make decisions. So the body scan, okay, let's just say you feel absolutely nothing in your feet.
mm,
And you get this sense of panic. Don't panic. Move to the next part of your body, the second
mm,
chakra. Is
okay.
it tingling? Is it hot? Again, you move up and up and up. Then you can come, you can DM me, you can DM Hannah, you can work through this, but you can Google what you think, but in practicality, it's about understanding if you have emptiness, you probably want to focus there. If you
Mm,
have heat, that's new positive energy coming in. So let's just say, we were talking about the throat before. Let's just say your throat feels really warm.
mm,
That's great. That means maybe you're learning a new way to communicate with a friend or family member or coworker or partner. And if it's cool, it means old stuff is either lingering or starting to move. And noticing that. It takes time to learn what the body scan is, but I do think it gives everyone a clue. Like if you have back tension, it's a clue, it's information. And I do think it helps release and breathe into parts of the body that maybe all day
mm,
you've been breathing into your brain, you've been giving your stomach some love because you're sitting in the you had a bunch of meals and your
mhm,
body needs to digest. But how can you get that information?
mm. I love that. I love that. Yeah. Thank you. So I want to talk about your Oracle deck for just a couple
Yeah.
minutes. I'm curious what your inspiration was for creating it, and then talk about it for a minute because I have not seen an Oracle deck like that before. And I love the and how, like those last, what was it, 7 cards or whatever. So I'd love for you to touch on that as well.
Yes. Well, I went on the Artist Way journey,
Mm,
and I was about 7 weeks in. For those who haven't read the Artist Journey, I wasn't interested in it. And then a colleague of mine who's a lot older than me in both years and years of experience, and he was an accountant by trade and then moved into more leadership coaching. And he said, my daughter and I do the Artist Way every 3 years together. And it's week by week by week homework. For those who haven't done it, you sort of get these little I wouldn't call them lessons, but it's like a little bit of a guided homework every week. And I said, well, if Ed can do it, I'm going to check this out.
mhm.
And on week 7 or about week 7-ish, they say, take yourself on an overnight date,
Okay.
an artist way date. And up before then, it'll say, take yourself on an artist walk and see what you notice. And then it sort of gathers, do something you wouldn't have normally done was like week 6. I think I tried to make eye pillows. Like I can't sew. I
Yeah.
mean, how the whole idea is exploring this creative side to yourself.
Mm,
And she also she talks a lot about um, morning pages. She sort of started the daily tradition of 3 pages. Julie Cameron. And at this, I went down to the Jersey Shore where you were living when we spoke on the phone and started to connect. And I love traveling alone. I know a
Mm.
lot of people don't, but I think it was years in corporate being away just really helps me reset.
Yeah.
And I always say to my husband, I only need 24 hours. And this, in this case, was 24 hours. My retreats are 24 hours.
Wow.
And I was born on the 24th of November. So 24 has always had significance. But as I've started into this wellness journey and paying attention to all things, I've always loved the moon. And I actually wanted to name my daughter Gibson after the Gibson girl on the moon. But my husband said no. But he, there are 12 new moons and 12 full moons. And we talk so much, whether it's movies or pop culture. When I was growing up, it was always about the full moon,
Mm-hmm.
always about the full moon.
Yeah.
And as I've gotten older and read more and had my own oracle decks, like, oh my gosh, there are these new moons.
Yeah.
So there are phases. And I went into that weekend thinking about the 12 new moons and the 12 full moons and phases in between. It came out of me. I just thought I was going away for the night. I had journal and a bunch of markers because that's what the artist way told me to sort of bring some
Yeah.
supplies. I knew I wouldn't watch TV. I knew I'd go out to dinner by myself. I didn't even make it to dinner. I just kept writing. I ended up writing the booklet that weekend. And creating the card. So the inspiration is really about you mentioned the ampersand. So the and focus on, like you said in the beginning, the black and white. I'm not going to the gym at all. I only have 30 minutes. Or I only feel like 30 minutes and I've committed to myself for the entire year. Anytime I go, it'll be an hour and then we don't go. Or, maybe it's like, I want to quit this job. I'm going to quit. Or we see a lot on social media, which, unfollow, right? It's like, I took this big leap and I made $10 million dollars and I have 70 billion followers. It's all a bunch of malarkey. And it's like, it is the idea of I don't like this job or I don't like this thing I'm doing or I don't like this partner that I've decided to pair up and collaborate with. But I'm not going to be a complete black and white thinker. I recognize that I am in some sort of contract with myself or with
Mm.
somebody else or work because I need the paycheck or the benefits, whatever your adulting is. How do you move out of that situation? How do you live in the and? How do you live in the in between?
Mm.
As adults, we must live in the gray. And it's uncomfortable because we want to make the decision like we're a 3-year old and say, I'm wearing the red sweater today. I'm not wearing the black sweater. That is really hard to do as an adult because we're dealing with so many variables, so many
Yeah.
tentacles. The last thing I'll say is that the deck, I purposely did the deck with a ton of white space because whether or not you use the booklet that I wrote with it and the prompts, there's also enough white space with a little bit
Mm.
of a graphic. You can interpret the card as you need.
Mm.
So, maybe one of my clients knew she was going to get laid off. She finally got laid off. She had the Oracle deck. She, although prepared for this layoff, like we knew it was coming. That's why she
Mhm.
started working with me. I need a plan. What am I going to do?
Right.
She hit a rut.
Mm.
After the layoff, it hit her ego. And so she started pulling cards and journaling on them. And then she started doodling with the cards. And then she started painting. And it just got her into a place. You don't have to paint or even be quote unquote creative
Mhm.
to, to look at the word on the deck and maybe the drawing. This one says evolution and it has
Mm.
moons. And maybe
Mhm.
you play with the idea of what that is for you. So that's why I did it. It was incredibly fast production, soup to nuts, creation to production. And I'm really excited that you loved it so much. And my friends in Stone Harbor love it so much to have it on their little tables.
Mm. Thank you for sharing. And I love that philosophy. And I love that you said we must live in the gray because we actually live in a world where it really almost like tries to force the black and the white, and we need to live in the black and the white, but actually so much of life is gray. All of life is gray, and learning to become uncomfortable, but comfortable with the uncomfortable, comfortable with with the unknown, is
Right.
so huge. And there's so many parallels that I feel like I can make with that. But like being uncomfortable with not knowing, being uncomfortable with a big part of conversations that we have with nervous system regulation is not so much like being level all the time. It's being okay with the slight anxiety, the slight depression, like the slight highs, the slight lows, and learning that all of that is life. Like life is not linear. We are not linear. That's the whole like meaning teaching from the moon, I think, as well. And you know that I'm
Yeah.
obsessed with the moons and all of that. I actually was looking up one of those things like see what the moon was when you were born, the day that you were born.
Mm,
I was born on a new moon, which it just cracks me up because when I first started in South Jersey, I that's when I first started my moon circles, and I started it on the new moon
new moon.
purposefully because of exactly what you said. Growing up, you hear everything about the full moon, and the full moon represents fullness. It represents like celebration and getting, completion. And the new moon is a really beautiful time to like plant new seeds, and it's almost like that. It really is representative of the death cycle of dying to then create new life. And if you like talk about the alignment of periods there too, like the new moon is associated with the menstrual phase, so the actual bleed. And there's so much like depth there
Right.
that I was like, we're doing a new moon circle. We're not gonna do a full moon circle. We're gonna do a new moon. And then a couple months later I figured out that I was born on a new moon. So I'm
I
like,
don't think
that's
I've
so
done
weird.
that. But
Yeah,
one of my friends said that she and her daughter, and there was like a third and fourth person in her lineage that were all born on full moon. So now I'm gonna look after I get off of
look
this.
it up.
But the just the idea of wish is the wrong word, but I like to make wishes on new moons. And again, it's not the
Mm,
right word, but almost
okay.
requests,
Yeah.
um,
Intentions.
intentions, and maybe I need a little help. And on the full moon, where I am celebrating, I am also letting go because I can't take on anymore. And it feels really good to have that
Yeah.
empty plate, that empty bowl where you get to fill it up with what you want. And it's a
Mm,
good reminder, especially as women, like you're saying, to just have that moment to fill your bucket up with what you want or need, because you know other people are going to fill it for you, whether
mm,
it's the responsibilities or the family or the caregiving and caretaking,
yeah.
and being the great friend and helping out and
Mm,
scheduling and organizing. That stuff all fills it. But having that moment where you're like, you know what, this is the right time to start to think about XYZ. And
yeah.
not beating yourself up for any of the other phases, not beating yourself up if you have a moment of black and white. And we all do it. I think what you said about meditating, Gwyneth Paltrow was on an episode and she said, I used to do all this transcendental meditation for, I think that's 20 minutes, at least twice a day. And she's like, I'm barely good. I'm barely getting 5 minutes a day.
Yeah.
So if she's not doing it 20 minutes a day, how the heck are the rest of us? She's got
Yeah.
she's got a lot of support. Not that I don't, but you know what I'm saying. She's got a world of help in her business and her life. So
Yeah.
I just like the idea of consistency and making it work. And I like what you said about there's so many small steps, because if
Mm,
we all had major milestones all the time, our nervous systems would be at the cortisol level of a soldier in war. I mean, we
yeah.
can't operate like that, and we want these big, the leap, which doesn't exist, or we want
Mhm.
whatever, the Shark Tank moment where we get
Yeah.
found, and those are very few and far between, thank goodness. But
Mhm.
and when they do come, are you prepared? Is it the direction you want? The marriage, the birth, the move, the buying and selling? Most of the time, I learned when I was 20, I went to this training and I learned all the way back then. It, this had nothing to do with somatics. It was part of my corporate training.
Mhm.
It takes the human body mind a year and a half to work through major changes.
Hmm.
So a big move, relocating,
Hmm.
having a kid, dealing with the death of a parent or loved one. And I'm older than you, having been through a little bit of that, I think that's about right.
Yeah.
We in 2024 are like, on to the next. Just get over it. Like, unpack those boxes from that new townhouse and freaking, and it's not fair. So I think a lot of these ways to practically come down from that buzzing, that high, so to speak, diving down a layer to say, like, what hurts in my body? What feels really good?
Mm.
Figuring that out. You don't need a practitioner. You don't need to pay, you don't need to pay a lot of money to do a body scan. You don't have to pay anything. You don't need to pay any money to sit outside in the new moon and just
Mhm.
think, like, what do I want to fill up with this month?
Mm. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Wow. So I want to begin to wrap up. Last question before we dive into human design, which I'm super excited to chat with you about. What is anything that we didn't touch on that you really wanted to make sure that you get across, or what is like one important message that you want to use this platform to remind people?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me too. And just focusing on ways to find clarity.
Mm.
Cannot help you if you don't know what you want. And I joke, who is it easier to go out to dinner with? The friend who literally is like, I don't care. I don't know. It's okay. Whatever you pick. Or is it like the person who's like, I want the guacamole from the Third Street Mexican place? It's a little bit easier to help that person get the guacamole. Now,
Mm.
they might be full, but then the next time, they might be have no reservations, but then the next time the three of you, the book club goes out, you're going to try to go to the Mexican place for her.
Yeah.
So this is true in a career. This is true in getting really specific on manifesting relationships. This is true on all things. I'm
Mhm.
in a cycle of really helping people find new jobs, new careers, new pathways. And they'll go and interview, not interview, rather, they'll go ask friends and mentors for help and they'll go in with completely open-ended questions. Don't do it. Don't stop talking to people until you get clear. And it's counterintuitive, but you already know the answer. So finding ways, whatever that is, to get clear first, then the things start to come your way, whatever the things are, the feelings, the whatever that is.
Hmm. Thank you. That was really, really powerful. I was going to talk about something else, but actually I want to build on what you said and then get your opinion on this.
All right.
So in human design, we each have what's called a manifestation process.
Mm.
And there's only
Hmm.
two. You are either a specific manifester or a non-specific manifester. Specific manifestors do very well, like with specifics. So you want a new job, and writing down a list of, I want to be making this much money, I want to work this number of days, this number of hours, I want to my new job is going to be within 20 minutes driving distance. I want to be in this field, blah, 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 blah. Very, very specific.
Male boss. I want to go in
Yes.
one day. I want to travel to Austin and LA. Totally.
Yes.
Totally.
So that's
Yep.
that's a specific manifester. Non-specific, this is what I want to point out
Mm,
and then expand upon, is non-specific is still like knowing, it's having that clarity, but it's being more specific on your feelings, the energy that you want to be
yes.
feeling, how you want to feel. So with the new job, instead of I want to be making 100 grand a year. I want to travel 2 weeks a year. I want to have that male boss. It's, I want to feel, why do you want to have a male boss? Like dive into that. Okay. I want to feel supported. I want to feel that somebody has my back. I want to feel that like this male boss, I want that masculine energy. So then my boss can create that container for then my feminine energy to flow.
Yeah.
Why do I want to travel? I want to feel free in my job. I don't want to feel caged in. I want to feel comfortable with my salary. It's not about how much money I necessarily want to make. It's that I
Right.
want to feel comfortable, that I'm not pinching pennies anymore, that I want to be able to go out to dinner with my friends and not look at the price of everything and then just be able to put my card in. So I am a specific manifester. You are actually a non-specific manifester. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. And
Mm.
oh yeah, no. Okay, I want to hear your thoughts on that, and then I have something else. But you go first on like what were your feelings hearing about both specific and non.
Yeah. So this is actually I have had human design. I've had my profile done in different ways. And then I was telling Hannah, for those listening, that I had a human design 101 come to my retreat in 2024 and people were fascinated.
Yeah.
I do feel like I don't know enough and it's very overwhelming. This is the first time I've actually heard about this, so this is interesting.
Eee.
The and there's so many layers to human
Yeah.
design. The It's very, very interesting to me. What runs parallel or overlaps is you need to know the what. We both need to know we want to work in marketing. We both
Yep.
know we only want to travel twice a year. We also want X amount of vacation days. We both need the what.
Mm-hmm.
I think for a non-specific, which makes sense now to me, is that it really hooks in to feelings and values. So, for example, one of my values is autonomy. And I don't mean, yes, financial autonomy, but I also mean decision making autonomy, which is why after a while, big corporate hierarchy, bureaucracy really started to like pound me in the head. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, it's like, okay, so I am going to write this book and I had a little blip, right? I had a hard medical year. And so I'm finally coming out of that. And I'm like, well, why do I want to write this book? I want to write it because writing's very autonomous.
Mm.
Eventually, you'll have an editor and a publisher who will tweak, but ultimately, it's your brain power, your style, and it'll be my schedule.
Yeah.
The other component is, how do I want to feel about it? I want to get excited about something. So it actually feels empowering to know that you can add these layers of manifesting. And how do you, I guess, feel about it when you're like, do you stay in that lane of specificity without adding feelings? I
Yeah.
mean, you're so in tune, I feel like, you know,
Yeah.
would
So let's preface just like getting your natal chart read, like we are all kind of all of them. Like we all like align with different parts. It's just this very small nuances. So thank you for pointing out that there's so much to human design. It's not just this, and like the other parts of your chart might affect this. However, two things. The thing that I wanted to say is often, not every time, but oftentimes we actually feel that the other one is easier. So it'd be easier to be a non-specific manifester since I'm a specific, which I do agree with at times, because I think for me sometimes, right, with like I want to be making this much money a year, it's like how do I arrive at that number is sometimes my pondering. Um, However, I will also say that in times in my life where I'm just like, in my business, I just want to help people and it doesn't matter how many people I'm reaching and blah 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 blah. Like that for me feels very ungrounded. And I was working with a coach, and they asked me to like write down, pick two goals. So right, I want to get a new car, and write down how much money you want to save each month to get that new car, how much money you want to use to pay off your credit card bills, and then get arrive at that number, and then figure out how many new clients you need, how many human design chart readings do you need to get, how many bundles like of
Right.
my integration, my breathwork, and my coaching bundles, and then write down that number, and that is your monthly goal. And I will
Right.
say, when I did that, magically people flow into my life that are like, hey, tell me about human design. I've been wanting to get my human design chart read for so long. Or, hey, I just found you randomly through Instagram, and you know one of my friends, and I would love to do a breathwork session with you. Like, where when I'm just like, yeah, whoever comes into my life. I just want to help people. I just want to, I just want to
Yeah.
have this good feeling of empowering people and empowering myself. It seems a lot more like I'm going against the grain. And when I
Mm.
have a specific goal, like when I have a specific number of people that I would like to call into my life, they seem to flow a little bit more easily. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for
It's
me, I had just had an epiphany actually this last week that I'm still getting, I was grinding when I left Wall Street. I came out of the chute. I knew I
Mm,
was leaving. I knew I had the Oracle deck to put in
yeah.
yoga studios or in, like you said, juice shops. And
Hmm.
I hit the ground running. I mean, I was selling, I never left my desk. It was a very masculine model. And I just got an opportunity to do this workshop. The series that I was talking about at the top of the hour. And I thought to myself, I'm not grinding anymore and stuff's still coming.
Mm,
So I think for me, having the why am I doing this and the feeling behind it is still, I love to talk about all of this together,
yeah.
how people communicate, how they show up to work with their rocks in their backpacks. And I still love that. And I don't have a specific number of like how many workshops I want to do in a year kind
Right.
of thing. I have more like I will do one retreat, I will do XYZ partnerships. But I think the idea of allowing myself to have the feeling behind it or the why or the value based goal will help me like continue on that letting go and not holding on so tightly
Hmm.
like what if you said your client number was 50 and you got 48?
Hmm.
Like that's the old me of being like, I can't believe in March I
Yeah,
didn't get the last two people. So I think it's a balance too of
it is.
letting that flow.
Hmm.
I don't know that has anything to do with being an unspecific manifester, but that idea of there's lots of ways to do this.
Hmm.
And sometimes we didn't talk about this, and I know we've got to close, but what I have separated myself from is the overdoing. So in this process of being a manifesting generator, I like to go. I like to have 12 rubber balls in the air. I love to have new ideas. I have a whole slew of notes. I have
Yep.
draft emails I've never sent, and that's okay. I'm good at starting things. I'm getting good at getting people excited, but there is a part of this world that I have found who constantly push themselves to get certifications in everything and
Oh,
spend
yes.
an inordinate amount of money on everything. And I have coaching clients who insist, right? They're already nurses or, career coaching clients. They're like, I'm a nurse and I've had 35 years and I'm going to go get another nursing degree. I'm giving a
Hmm.
very generic example from a long time ago, but it's the idea of, you know what? No, we have experience in our midlives that we need to just leverage, and not everything, we make things really difficult. And
Mm,
the other thing that I think sometimes people do, and I don't know if this has to do with just people being evil, even in the wellness world or certain types of human design, but this focus on there's so much wrong and we are broken and triggered and
wow.
dealing with trauma, and we are dealing with trauma. I'm not trying to minimize that, but how, as a manifesting generator, I've come to this component of that is part of me, my childhood, or that shitty boss, or the sexual harassment in the workplace, or that terrible boyfriend. But also, I have this experience that levels on top of me. And I go into those parts of me that maybe weren't so great or have
Mm.
caused issues in my current life. But I think that as a manifesting generator, I've also been like, you know what? That shitty boss who basically discriminated against me getting that promotion, that's only part of my story.
Yeah.
Like the blessing of being an MG is I'm like, hey, I got all the stuff going on. You're not going to take, hey, boss, you're not going to take me out forever. You
Yeah.
know, it was like a crappy year of my life where I
Mm.
was very depressed because of how he was treating me and harassing me and all the things. I don't know. I'm curious on sort of those that sort of dwell in that trigger space, high trauma space, and let it overtake them. And I do notice some wellness people, unfortunately, preying on those people. I just don't
Mhm.
know. Do you think it's because of a certain human design, or you think it's just sort of some of the trends in wellness?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I think that there is a benefit in talking about it so much to almost normalize it, like that this trauma is okay, or it's okay to talk about your trauma
Agreed.
and hide it. But I do agree with you in making that your life. My question, I guess, would be like, is it really that person's life, or is it just that they post about that all the time because
Right.
that's their business almost, or like that's, like that's what they want to get across. My hope would be that they don't make it their life,
Right.
because you're so right. And I think, like, I had a conversation a couple weeks ago with an internal family systems
Mhm.
therapist, and we were talking about, and you were using the word part, like it's just a part of me, whatever happened, whether it's good, bad, indifferent. We have so many parts of us, and a lot of these parts are protecting us from whatever they need to be protecting us from. But it's just one part of you, and to use that, you're kind of reminding me of this conversation I was just having with my friend, and I was trying to recount this quote as something, and I did a terrible job there, and I'm going to do a terrible job here, but of like in the wellness industry, in the trauma healing, whatever, in the like growth journey, a lot of times we focus so much on like sitting in it, sit with that, like, that part of you, that year that was really really difficult, and there's so much somatic work and blah 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 that you can do, and there's so much benefit of that. But one thing I think that we don't talk about enough is that you don't have to stay there. You don't, like, your healing journey is always happening, but it doesn't mean that I have to like sit in this, like, I feel icky today, and let me just sit with everything, and let me just allow myself to spiral for the entire day. And then that entire
Right.
day might turn into a week, and like, oh, well, I'm just healing. I'm working, like, I'm just sitting in it. And there's benefits in sitting in it, but there's also benefits in like recognizing this is just a part of me. This is just something that's coming up. And let me, how can I move forward from
Right.
that? And like, also, if we're talking about human design, like the three, we both have a three in our profile, and the
Mm.
three is the experimenter, and it's very much like learning from trial and error. So all of the bad situations that I've had
Right.
happen in my life, all of the trauma, all of the shit that I've gone through, I always say, like, I wouldn't even go back and change it because I learned so much from it. And
Right.
like, I think that is the conversation that we need to have of, yes, let me sit with it. And that's what we do in breath work. We sit with what's
A
coming
hundred
up.
percent.
But the breath work is an hour. And let's allow that emotion to be expressed and released. And then let's then we have the integration part. Like, that's the
Right.
part
No,
of
and
the breath work that I really love, is like the reset. How do I want to show up now that I've expressed it, now that I've processed it a little bit? How do I want to show up? Because you don't have to be this victim. You don't have to be this, whatever it is. I mean, whatever it is that you're going through.
Yeah, no, I think it brings our conversation full circle. I almost
Yeah.
as you were talking, it's almost like, okay, you go into the valley, you get into the
Mm,
mud and the muck. And I think in Reiki too, like I see a lot of energy as like mucky, like as you're walking into like a pond that hasn't
yep.
had rain in a while. It's just like you go in, you're like, it's a little mossy in here, a little slimy. And you go in, and then same in somatic release or the breath work, you're like, okay, but then let's get to that fresh water. Let's get to
Yes.
that movement. Let's get to that, the tides. Let's move into it. And then it's almost like a plateau. So you're in the valley and then you come out and you're like, okay, I've reached this, I've learned something. I noticed red flags, whatever
Mhm.
those red flags are for me, for my energy, for this, for that. And not every situation needs to be completely, like we said, black and white, where we never revisit it. But I agree. I
Absolutely
think
not.
you and I have a similar practice where we're moving through things.
Yeah.
And I guess it makes sense that it's broader than human design, but moving through things and working with people like you and I who want to allow that release so that you
Mhm.
get the learning. And I also love what you're saying is you don't know necessarily what's going to come up in the breath work.
Mhm.
You don't necessarily know what's going to show up. People be like in Reiki or in coaching, they'll be like, this is bothering me, or my hip is bothering me, or I haven't been sleeping. And then I'm like, the back of your ears are blazing in Reiki. And they're like, what
Yeah.
does that mean? And we go into this whole piece. So I
Yeah.
think that full circle moment here is, maybe the and is working through it. And one day you're in the muck, and the next day you're back at the top of the mountain, and you're like, all right, well, I learned something yesterday. I did this somatic release. And then
Yeah.
today I journaled about it. And then, wow, I'm having this like great day where I'm feeling that zone of genius, whatever that
Mhm.
means.
Yeah. I love your analogy of the water because I use that in my breath work.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
I say like the first half of our breathwork session, we all have a cup of capacity, right? Like we have a
Uh,
metaphorical cup of capacity, and we want that capacity to be filled with clear, fresh, filtered water. But other people come in and they drop their little shit nuggets. They
yeah.
drop their dirt and our cup gets really murky. And we come to this point where this, you could also call it pressure. This pressure builds up and we need a way to express it. We need to express our traumas. We need to normalize talking about it. We need to express these emotions, whether it's trauma or just stress or burnout or anger,
Yeah.
frustration, pain. We need an opportunity to express that and empty out our cup. So then we have the opportunity, which I think this is the most important part. The second half of breath work, we have the invitation to ask ourselves, what do I want to fill my cup back up with? What clear, fresh, filtered water do I want to pour back into my cup? And that's the clarity. That's the
I
like
love
you
that
can't get
analogy.
clarity if you can't fill your cup with clarity if your cup is full with dirty water, right? Like you can't. You have to empty it out and then pour in what you need to pour in, what
Yeah.
your body is
Hey,
craving.
maybe it's a little sparkling something, and this, you got a little sparkling lemonade this time, and you want a little effervescence. Next time you want some filtered water, But I think
Right.
that's so perfect in finding people that want to move through in a healthy way is
Yeah.
so important, and not add more of that pressure. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes you and I are in agreement here and practice in a certain way, but I do think it's important for people to notice that some people are adding pressure to our
Mm.
healing journeys. And it's unfortunate. I haven't seen it a ton, but I'm starting to, my ears are peaking up. So there's something going on out there that I'm like, you know what? Let's just allow the movement of that cycle.
Yeah. Right. Allow it because you're going to be in the valley. You're going to be just like we have four seasons. We're going to go through winters, but spring always comes. We're going to go through summer, but fall always comes. Like,
I think spring's finally here. Let's hope so.
loud. Thank God. I need it. I need some sunshine. I've been sitting outside a lot. So,
Me
anyway,
too.
thank you
Me
so much
too.
for this conversation. That was such a great spin off at the end. I appreciate you coming. Where can people find you and connect with you? Where do you hang out the most? And everything will also be in the show notes, the
In the show
description.
notes.
Yeah.
I hang out on Instagram. I'm still a believer. I dabble in Substack, but all of my Substack articles are also on my website. So I'll just say Instagram is underscore Lynn Mull, and then it's lynnmull.com. You can also email me at hello@lynnmull.com, and I am not that far away. It's for better or for worse. My corporate days, I'm pretty quick to respond. So if I'd love to hear from people if they want a little mini oracle reading. I am happy to do it for free. I'll pull a card, and if they tell me their name in the email or in my DM, where they're currently located, town and state, I'll do a quick reading, and then I'll drop a little code in for anything, a little percentage off the oracle deck.
Yes, please go down and check out. Even if you don't get it, just check it out because it's beautiful. Your artwork is beautiful
Oh, thanks.
and it's a beautiful deck, so make sure you check it out below.
I know. I
Thank you
can't
so
wait to
much.
collaborate with you more and more.
Me
And
too.
now
Thank
I'm
you for
gonna like go
coming.
look up my design chart again and be like, what's going on?
Yes, absolutely do. You can learn so much.